Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Unfound Now, the monthly series here on YouTube where I analyze a recent disappearance. Of course, on the regular podcast, I cover disappearances that are at least a year old. Of course, we've covered disappearances going back to the 70s, 60s, 50s, and even one back into the 1940s. In addition, I've started a new series, monthly series for Patreon and special members of this YouTube channel called Found, where I look at disappearances that eventually got solved. But for Unfound Now, what you are watching now, this is something I started almost 3 years ago, right there when COVID was becoming, unfortunately, a big thing. And we're coming up on, I guess, about our 36th episode. I don't know where the time goes. But today I'm going to be talking about the disappearance of Shawna Rali Halford, who went missing from New Orleans, Louisiana on March 30th of 2023. She was 25 years old. She was there with friends. And during the map section of this video, I'll be reading an article that was written back at the time of her disappearance. You should know she is not a resident of New Orleans. She's actually from Mississippi, and my understanding is that she was there like on a vacation or a trip with friends of hers, and that is when she went missing. Now, there are three reasons that this series Unfound Now got started almost 3 years ago, and the first one is education. Hopefully you are a subscriber to the podcast that comes out every Friday, and you know how important education is to me regarding disappearances. I love learning about them. I love teaching you about them, and of course, we're all learning together, and that's one of the reasons it's so important for me to speak at schools like I've done. Education. This Unfound Now continues that theme that Unfound has had since the beginning almost 7 years ago. Number two is publicity. Any disappearance could need some attention. Even those well-known ones like Maura Murray, Jennifer Kesse, Brian Schaefer, even those well-known disappearances, you never know when that additional piece of publicity is going to move a disappearance toward a resolution. So that's number two. And number three, this gives all of you an kind of an insight into how I look at disappearances when I read the articles, just like you do. For the first time, you're on the internet and something pops up. A missing person, has disappeared within the last 24 hours. Gives you an opportunity to kind of see how I read between the lines, and maybe you read between the lines too. So it's kind of a look, I guess, to use a term from The Wizard of Oz, getting you to see maybe a little bit behind the curtain. But for each Unfound Now since the beginning, I always have three important points. Items that are particular to that disappearance, and I use those as the educational points later in the video. And for this one, I want you to remember these three items because I will get much deeper into them later. Number one, in a split second. Number two, video again. And number three, a worldwide crisis. And like I said, I'm going to get deeper into those 3 points after the map section. And so I'm going to go to the map section now, and then I will be back here on camera. Okay, let's take a look at the map for the disappearance of Shawna Rali, R-A-L-I, Halford, H-A-L-F-O-R-D. I'm going to read an article to you while you can look at this map. Right there in the center of the screen is Oz, right here, which is where she and friends were that night that she disappeared. And then I will do a little diagramming, but you can look at that just for a second as I read this. Shawna Halford was acting okay, not like she's been drugged or anything, after leaving a New Orleans bar last week, her mother says. It was after leaving Club Oz around midnight last Thursday that she disappeared. She reportedly told a friend she was going to leave for a walk around Bourbon Street. And I'll come back to this in a bit, but Bourbon Street actually goes in this direction, southwest, northeast direction is not one of these streets. It's this street right here. But she did not return, police stated in a press release, after she went missing. Her mother, Shelley Halford, and her husband drove to New Orleans, Monday morning in an effort to find her. While they were there, they walked around District 8, where Shawna was last seen, and handed out flyers. They will be traveling to New Orleans again this weekend. And you should know that this article was written way back at the beginning of April of 2023, so not quite 2 months ago. Shelley says that detectives told them that while watching security footage of the night Shawna went missing, she was acting normal while walking down Bourbon Street. She wasn't talking to anyone, just walking, looking around by herself, her mother told WLBT News. Detectives will continue to update Shelley and her husband on what they find while watching the security footage. Shawna, 25 years old, who goes by her middle name Rali, lives in Hickory, Mississippi with her grandmother and has a 4-year-old son. She has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and paranoid schizophrenia, and from what her parents know, has not been taking her medication. So, once again, here is where they were that night. And, of course, there have been a few different articles written and on her disappearance, but none have really been written since beginning of April. There is no new news here, me doing this video on May 29th of 2023. So it's been almost 2 months. And no articles have been written since about that first week of her disappearance. But a couple of the articles are a little different. It's hard to get an idea of whether she left and wanted them to come with her, or they were trying to keep her from leaving because the show wasn't over. It's a little contradictory, I guess I would say. I'm not saying anybody's lying or anything. It's just the way it's been reported a couple different places is a little different. It's hard to say if she wanted to leave and they wouldn't go with her, or something a little different than that. So they're here, and this is Bourbon Street. Now, I would say, the writing is down Bourbon Street. Of course, we don't know, there are no hills or anything. So when they say down Bourbon Street, it's unclear if it's going in a southwest direction or was she going in a northeast direction. Hard to say. But what is clear is they did not say that she went this way, which is this street right here. And maybe if I zoom in, are they going to give us a name for that street? Let's see if I can get a name. St. Anne Street. St. Anne Street is that street going right here, so Oz is right at the corner of St. Anne Street and Bourbon Street. I've never been to New Orleans, just so you know. So it didn't say she was going down St. Anne Street, for example, toward the Mississippi River. And you should know I have done a couple of Google Street Views. I'm not going to do them for this video, though. But that doesn't mean she couldn't have made it over to the Mississippi River. I'm not saying you have to believe that or I believe that. But anytime a major river is near where a person went missing, you have to think about it. It's just the way it is. Whether it's Jake Lachley or Shane Fell or Ben Archer, the Delaware River, whatever the rivers may be, you at least have to think about it. So to zoom out a little bit, this is the area, of course, coming in, looping around like the Mississippi River does on its way out there to the Gulf of Mexico. We have some parks here, and maybe if we want to go to an actual satellite view instead of that being drawn like it is, See, there are some green areas here, but Louis Armstrong Park right up here at the top of the screen, kind of nearby, but that doesn't sound, it could have been in the direction. We just don't know because this is Bourbon Street. Was she going this way? Was she going this way? It is not clear in anything I've read. I've even gone to web sleuths. Sometimes you get locals who maybe know a little more than what the national media says. Really didn't pick up any new information or, unique information there. I guess, though, what we have to remember, given that all of us have experienced this recently with the disappearance of Beau Man, is that if she did have something happen that was of a personal nature, she could be not far, even though this is all city and everything, she could be not far away. I'm not hoping that she's dead. She might be. But given that Beau Man was found a quarter mile down the street from where he was dropped off on the Uber, I suppose we have to start thinking maybe it is possible for people to vanish right in the middle of cities and go into some little back alley or something, and something happen and nobody find them for a year and a half. I guess this is possible. Maybe it's possible for Shawna's disappearance here as well. So that's the location. I really don't know what else to tell you about this map. Of course, if she went into the Mississippi River, then we know how tough that can be trying to find people in rivers, especially big rivers like the Mississippi. But it doesn't sound like she was walking in that direction. And also, I might say, was she, I know, I'm going to guess she knew the Mississippi River goes through New Orleans, but was she aware that it was right down the street? Hard to say. We just don't know. Who knows what was in her mind at the time. So now I'm going to go back to those 3 points that I brought up at the beginning of this video, get a little deeper into them, and then I will give you my best insight into what probably happened to Shawna. Okay, I'm back. Before I go into those 3 points that I mentioned before the map section, I want to remind you, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to this channel if you are not yet a subscriber. And maybe hit that join button below. If you're on your phone, you're not going to be able to see the join button. You'll have to go to a regular laptop computer or tablet, something like that. It's just a weird thing about the YouTube app on certain types of phones. But if you'd like to support Unfound monetarily, what we do here, publicizing disappearances going way back to the 1940s, the assistance that myself and my assistants give to family members out there, please consider hitting the join button right below this screen. And maybe you want to think instead about becoming a Patreon member. Patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. You will get a lot of things there that the rest of the public doesn't get. Of course, I wish every person that listens to Unfound or watches this YouTube channel was a Patreon supporter or at least a member of this channel. So please go check all of that out. We would appreciate your support. All right, let's take a look at the first point. And if you see me looking off to my right, your left, I do not do these videos off the top of my head, just so you know. The first item is in a split second. Shawna's disappearance, and I realize that people called her Rali, but just to keep everything kind of orderly here, her official name, birth certificate name is Shawna Halford. I'm just going to stick to that. And that's what you'll find, of course, for example, on NamUs. But for Shawna, we see how quickly a disappearance can happen. I think the public perception is that it usually takes some days. For if a disappearance is going to go on for a while, this one, of course, is already about 2 months old. For a disappearance to get to 2 months old, well, it must have really been odd circumstances that people really didn't realize the person was missing for like a week or something. That is not true. Not true at all. Of course, it depends on the circumstances and the person and the location, a lot of things put together. But you can't make a blanket statement like that. any person pretty much can disappear in a split second. Now, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I would say any person can disappear in less than 10 minutes. I believe that. All of us. Depending on what's going on in our lives, the people who are around us, the relationships we are in, are we by ourselves or are we with others? It can all factor in to the point where, yes, somebody can go missing in 10 minutes or less. Like I said, maybe not a second for everybody, but pretty much anybody, 10 minutes, unless we're talking like maybe the leader of a country or something. But all the average people out there, including myself, I'm an average person. It doesn't take very long for a person like that to disappear, whether it's a suicide, foul play, accident, some sort of mental health issue that may be the situation with Shawna, and I'll get into that a little later. But a disappearance like Shawna's is not as rare as you might think, as the public might think. And we've run into that on Unfound, and I'll just give you some names. Tiffany Johnson, she went missing from Texas. Unfortunately, she was surely killed by an ex-boyfriend. In fact, he went to jail for kidnapping her, but not killing her. She is still missing. But she went missing in about a minute. She was at her apartment complex he showed up. They were having some sort of argument. Her brother was viewing it. They went out of sight for about a minute. The brother got suspicious. He went downstairs, went around the corner, and he saw the ex-boyfriend getting into his car and driving off. Tiffany was nowhere to be found, and she is still missing, and this is several years after her disappearance. She disappeared in a minute. Now, the belief is that this guy did something to her, and put her in the trunk of his car, and somehow was able to get rid of her, and she still has not been found yet. 1 minute is all it took. Another disappearance that we covered, Nylene Marshall. This was from, I believe, Montana. She was a little girl. This is going well back, like over 30 years ago, if not 40 years ago. And her family was at some sort of gathering, like at a picnic area, and she went missing in a matter of minutes. What actually happened to her, a little more up in the air. Did she walk off? Did she get abducted? It is still unclear all these years later, but it was clear it happened in a matter of just a couple minutes. And then a very well-known disappearance that we covered very early on in Unfound's existence back in September of 2016 was Jason Jolkowski. All he was doing as a 19-year-old was walking from his house to a local high school, maybe about a 10-minute walk, where a coworker was going to be driving him to his job where they worked together. Somewhere in that walk, in 10 minutes, he went missing. No allegations that Jason had any problems with anybody or any mental health issues or was thinking about running off. Nothing like that. Very clean-cut, seemingly very straight-laced, no issues with him, 19-year-old. In 10 minutes, he went missing, and that was over 20 years ago. He is still missing. And probably one of the most mysterious disappearances that we've covered on Unfound. So this is how quickly it can happen. And I know the title of this section is In a Split Second. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it's not crazy to say in less than 10 minutes. Keep that in mind. So moving on, number 2 point is video. Again, this is a topic that I've mentioned before on these Unfound Nows, but I'll keep bringing them up just to make sure everybody understands the principle. Video is overrated regarding disappearances. I know we all think that if more disappearances had video, that more of them would get solved. There is no proof that that is true. We might know more about the disappearance, but there's no proof that it will help solve it. And as I've stated, what I've determined over 290 disappearances is that unless the video actually shows the missing person, for example, jumping off a bridge, or the video actually shows the missing person actually getting abducted from a roadside or something like that, pretty much video is useless. And so for, of course, Shawna's disappearance, we have this video of her walking on Bourbon Street after leaving her friends. Unfortunately, the news accounts don't say much about, well, how many videos was she seen on? What direction was she going? It says, like, her demeanor, it seemed like she was okay, but how many video cameras were able to follow her down the street? And my impression is in New Orleans, especially on Bourbon Street, there are a lot of video cameras there. And in fact, there's a lot of these like live cams that are always streaming, and they aren't even necessarily security cams. They're just always streaming directly to YouTube or somewhere else. So we don't have any information about, well, what was the actual location of where she was last seen on video? We don't know. And it may not, even if we knew, it may not show anything. So it's a little frustrating, but I don't want all of you to get caught up in the idea of, well, if we just had more video, we might know what happened. There's no guarantee with Shawna's disappearance or any other. And some examples from Unfound's catalog of disappearances: Kyle Fleischman. He was seen on video in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, multiple times. This is a disappearance that we covered on Unfound in September of 2022. Many times. He's still missing. And it's been several years since he disappeared in Charlotte. There are some beliefs out there that it was foul play. There are beliefs that he walked off. Did he have an accident? He might have been drunk. So we just don't know. But plenty of video of Kyle hasn't helped the solution to come to a resolution regarding his disappearance. On the other hand, with Esther Westenbarger, which is a disappearance we covered in 2017, she was seen on video leaving a bar by herself, getting into her Cadillac, and driving off in the general direction of her home, and she only lived a mile and a half away. She never reached her home. And it took a couple years. She went missing in 2009. In 2019, she and her car were found in a local retention pond. So even though there was video of her driving off by herself, of course, she could have run into foul play somewhere. It did not help in the resolution of her disappearance. In fact, it was complete luck that she and her car were found. Video did not help, was not helpful at all. Keep that in mind. And then probably the disappearance that we've had on Unfound that had the most video was of Tom Brown. This is a disappearance that is still very much up in the air. His remains were found, but no cause of death has been determined. But a lot of video around Canadian Texas of that night. Some people, they say the Durango that he was driving on video. I will tell you that having watched the video myself, it's hard to tell whose car is whose SUV is whose. But that did not assist. Those videos, a bunch of video, hours and hours and hours, did not assist in the finding of his remains. Once again, like Esther, Tom Brown was found by accident. So we just have to keep that in mind. So we get caught up with Shawna. Man, if we just had more video, it necessarily wouldn't be a guarantee of anything. It's certainly interesting. I like watching video of missing people, just trying to find those little idiosyncrasies or whatever else. It's what I do since I started the podcast in 2016. But it is amazing how much video I've watched over the years, and none of it has brought about a resolution, any of the disappearances that we've covered. It's been other things that have brought about those resolutions. And then finally, number 3 topic for this Unfound now concerning the disappearance of Shawna Halford is the worldwide crisis. We have a huge mental health problem going on in the world. Maybe I should just stick to my country, my culture of the United States. I think what we're learning more and more, and especially myself, given that I do disappearances and nothing else, this is my job, there are so many disappearances connected to problems in mental health. The treatment of it, people not getting treatment for it, can be a combination of things, but it's amazing how many of these disappearances, in one way or another, can be somehow connected to mental health. And that's even for the ones that end up being foul play. And I have to admit, I can't speak from a point of education on this because I've never had any mental health issues. Maybe some people think that I'm crazy in a layman's term sense, but I've never, had to take any medication or anything like that. I've never had any suicidal thoughts and things like all of that. But more and more, I'm finding that people like myself are not as plentiful as I thought. And that doesn't mean my life's perfect or anything. And I have been seeing a therapist once in a while, but really my problems compared to most other people's are not very big. But still, on the other hand, though, when I go to the doctor, I don't dispute my doctor's advice. I may not have any mental health issues, but cancer runs in my family. Both my biological parents died of cancer. My brother Brian had cancer. He's fully recovered now for about 10 years now, and he's in great health now. But so this is something that I watch out for. Likewise, heart attacks run in my family. So I get my blood tested, and I take cholesterol medication. I've been doing that for a while, and I'm 52 now. So I take responsibility for my own health. But what you find, and as you heard in that article, here was Shawna not taking responsibility for her own health. And I realize some of this medication, as I've heard, make people feel like zombies and everything. But this is the alternative. That people then end up making decisions that are hard to understand. They go missing. They get behind the wheels of cars and everything else. And this then creates a health risk for the rest of us. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. And in those moments, if a person does have some more sort of mental illness, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, in those moments of clarity, somehow they have to tell themselves, you know what, I have to stay on this medication. It's best for myself and it's best for everyone around me. So, like I said, I don't have a history of horrible mental health or bad mental health for myself, but I do know what it's like to be told, you know what, Ed, you got to watch out for this, you got to watch out for that, and I do those things. So, and one more thing about mental health is mental health disappearances are taking up more and more of the percentage pie. If we were to put all of the disappearances like in a circle, like one of these pie charts, I can tell year by year, disappearances connected to mental health, that little piece of the pie is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. To the point that if you were to go back and read about disappearances, for example, of the 1970s and 80s, you would not, in those accounts, whether you go to the Charlie Project or whatever, you just don't read as much about schizophrenia and bipolar disorder or anything like that. This is something that seems to be a 21st century phenomenon. And my assessment is that as the percentage of disappearances that are murders, in my opinion, is going, that piece of the pie is getting smaller, so the piece of the pie is getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. The percentage that are due to mental health issues, that piece is getting thicker and thicker and thicker in that pie chart. It's, once again, if you are a person who studies disappearances like I do, once again, because it's my job, these are some of the things that you notice. And to speak for my country again, it's no wonder to me that we have a huge mental health problem in the United States. We have a huge addiction problem. We have a huge overdose problem. And thus those things are taking up more and more of that disappearance percentage pie here in 2023. And the issue is that all of those things are somewhat controllable. Unlike maybe disappearances that are murder, where a lot of them are crimes of passion or something, all these people who have these mental health issues, the friends, their family know it, they themselves know it, and still we have this huge crisis. Something is going on. So that is the worldwide crisis. It's going on in other countries as well, but the United States, I'm just more aware of it here, but I'm sure it's going, and I've read that it's going on in many, many other places of the world, at least those countries that don't shy away from talking about such things. So my impressions, you can't ignore, as I stated in the map part, you can't ignore the fact that the Mississippi River is right there. In addition, given the mental health issues that Shawna had, and to read the article and see that she wasn't taking her medication like she should, we have to understand that anything is possible. Any viable scenario outside of being beamed up to a UFO or something like that is possible. It very well could be that she took off, she got on a bus, and she's in Montana right now. It very well could be that she went down to the Mississippi River and jumped in for whatever reason. It very well could be that somebody came along, and even though the person didn't ask her for a ride, she says, hey, can you give me a ride somewhere? And that's what that person did. And the person has nothing to do with the disappearance. Might not even realize that Shawna is missing. Or it could have been somebody who harmed Shawna. Anything is possible when we start looking at a missing person who has mental health issues, and then we start looking at the surrounding area. Very, very important. However, having said that, we know that being homeless is tough. Living out there on the streets, living on the sidewalk is very difficult, and it's even tougher for women. Much, much, much more dangerous. So that has to be factored into it as well. And like I said earlier regarding in the map section when I was talking about Bowman, normally I would reject the idea that somebody could die in an alleyway and not be recognized or not be identified or seen for a couple months. But that may be what happened to Bowman, that he was right down the street from where he got dropped off by that Uber, just a quarter mile away. He might have been there for a year and a half and nobody realized it. That's still a possibility, and that's a fairly newer disappearance as far as somewhat being resolved, as remains being found in April of 2023, and he went missing in late 2021. So we just can't rule out anything. So I really can't put my finger on it. I have to admit, given my experience, my first choice would be that Shawna went into the water. You just can't deny that the Mississippi River is right there. How much money would I put on that? Probably not much. But if I was pressed to pick a resolution or the reason she is missing, that would be it. But trust me, a lot of other possibilities should still be on the table. So that is my analysis. That's the Unfound Now coverage for the disappearance of Shawna Rali, R-A-L-I is her middle name, or the name she went by for the people who knew her well, Halford, Halford, from New Orleans, Louisiana, on March 30th of 2023. She is a 25-year-old female, not a resident of New Orleans. She's from Hickory, Mississippi. She was there in New Orleans on a trip with friends, and that's when she went missing. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please consider hitting the join button below, or go to patreon.com to support, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast to support what we do here. And you will see me again next month. Thanks for watching.